The community hall was packed that evening. Every seat was taken, and some people even stood along the walls near the back. It was the annual charity talent show, an event the small town had been hosting for over 15 years. People came from nearby villages too, bringing their families, their snacks, and their loudest clapping hands. The air smelled like popcorn and old wood, and the buzzing of hundreds of conversations filled the room like a warm blanket. Somewhere in the back row, tucked between her grandmother and a large man who kept coughing into his sleeve, sat a little girl. She was only 8 years old, small for her age, with big brown eyes that seemed to carry more weight than any child's eyes should. Her name was Lily, and she had not wanted to come here tonight. Her grandmother had insisted. She said it would be good for both of them to get out of the house. It had been almost a year now since Lily's mother passed away, and the house still felt too quiet, too empty, too full of memories that hurt to touch. Lily's grandmother thought that maybe some music and laughter would help. Maybe it would remind them both that life still had some color left in it. But Lily wasn't so sure. She sat with her hands folded in her lap, her feet dangling above the floor because the seat was too high for her. She wore a simple blue dress, the one her mother had bought for her second grade school picture. It was getting a little small now, tight around the shoulders, but Lily refused to stop wearing it. It still smelled faintly of the lavender perfume her mother used to wear. And sometimes, when Lily closed her eyes and pressed the fabric to her nose, she could almost pretend her mother was still there. In her pocket, she carried something she never went anywhere without. It was a photograph, worn soft at the edges from being held so many times. The picture showed her mother on a stage much like this one, mid-song, her mouth open and her eyes closed, completely lost in the music. Her mother had been a singer, not a famous one, not someone you would see on television or hear on the radio, but a singer nonetheless. She sang at church, at weddings, at small local events, and she had the kind of voice that made people stop what they were doing and just listen. Lily remembered falling asleep to that voice. She remembered waking up to it too, her mother humming softly while making breakfast, turning the simple act of frying eggs into something magical. Music was everywhere when her mother was alive. It filled every corner of their little home, leaked out through the windows, danced in the garden where her mother hung the laundry. And then, just like that, it was gone. The sickness came fast, too fast for anyone to prepare. 1 month, her mother was singing at the town fair. And 3 months later, she was gone. Lily still didn't fully understand it. How could someone so full of life, so full of sound, just disappear? Where did all that music go? Lily had inherited her mother's voice. Everyone said so. Her grandmother, her teachers, the neighbors who heard her singing to herself while playing in the backyard. But Lily never sang for anyone on purpose. Not anymore. Her voice felt like a secret now. Something precious and fragile that she kept hidden deep inside her chest. She only let it out when she was completely alone, late at night when her grandmother was asleep, or in the shower where the water could cover the sound. She was afraid of her own voice. Afraid that if she let it out, really let it out, she would feel her mother's absence even more. Afraid that people would compare her to the woman she could never live up to. Afraid that singing would make her cry. And once she started crying, she might never stop. So she kept quiet. She listened to others sing instead. On the stage tonight, a man was juggling while riding a unicycle. He wasn't very good at it. He kept dropping the balls and wobbling dangerously, but the crowd cheered him on anyway. That was the thing about this town. People supported each other, even when the performance was a mess. Especially when the performance was a mess. Lily watched without really seeing. Her mind kept drifting back to other nights, other shows. Her mother had performed at this very talent show 3 years ago. Lily had sat in the front row that time, bouncing with excitement, waving at her mother before the music started. Her mother had winked at her, just for her. A little secret between them. And then she had opened her mouth and filled the entire room with a sound so beautiful that Lily had felt it in her bones. That was the last time her mother had performed here. The next year, she was too sick. And the year after that, she was gone. Lily's grandmother reached over and took her hand. Her grandmother's hands were soft and wrinkled, warm in that comforting way that only grandmother's hands can be. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. The gentle squeeze said everything. "I know this is hard. I'm here. We'll get through this together." Lily squeezed back. The juggling man finally finished his act, catching all 3 balls in one dramatic swoop that was probably more luck than skill. The crowd applauded generously, and he took a bow so deep his nose nearly touched his knees. The host walked back onto the stage. He was a tall man with a friendly face and a voice that boomed through the microphone like he was born to use one. His name was Mr. Peters, and he had been hosting this show for as long as anyone could remember. He made jokes that weren't always funny, but he told them with such enthusiasm that people laughed anyway. Lily liked him. He had known her mother. Sometimes, when he saw Lily around town, he would stop and tell her a story about something funny her mother had said or done. Those stories were little gifts, tiny pieces of her mother that Lily could add to her collection of memories. Tonight, Mr. Peters was in especially good spirits. The show had been a success so far, and the donations for the children's hospital were already higher than last year. He wiped his forehead with a handkerchief and grinned at the crowd. Lily had no idea that in just a few minutes, her entire life was about to change. She had no idea that this ordinary Saturday night, in this ordinary community hall, in this ordinary small town, was going to become the most extraordinary night of her young life. She just sat there in her blue dress, holding her grandmother's hand, thinking about her mother, completely unaware that the universe had plans for her, big plans, and they were about to begin. Mr. Peters shuffled through some papers on his little wooden podium and cleared his throat into the microphone. The sound echoed through the hall, making a few people in the front row wince. He laughed and apologized, adjusting the microphone stand with the clumsy confidence of someone who had done this 100 times before. The show had been running for almost 2 hours now. There had been singers, dancers, a magic act that went slightly wrong when the rabbit refused to come out of the hat, and of course, the juggling man on the unicycle. The crowd was happy but getting tired. Some of the younger children had fallen asleep on their parents' laps. A few teenagers in the middle rows were sneaking glances at their phones, their faces lit up by the blue glow of their screens. Lily was tired too. Her eyelids felt heavy, and she found herself leaning slightly against her grandmother's shoulder. The warmth of the hall, combined with the soft murmur of voices around her, was making her drowsy. She thought about asking her grandmother if they could leave soon. They had stayed long enough, hadn't they? They had supported the charity. They had clapped for every performer. Surely they had done their part. But before she could open her mouth to ask, Mr. Peters said something that made her sit up straight. "Now, folks, we have a little tradition here at our talent show," he announced, his voice taking on a playful tone. "Every year, we like to give someone from the audience a chance to shine. Someone who didn't sign up, someone who maybe didn't even know they had talent hiding inside them." A ripple of excitement went through the crowd. People started looking around at each other, some with nervous smiles, others shaking their heads as if to say, "Not me. Please, not me." Lily felt her grandmother's hand tighten slightly around hers. She didn't think anything of it. She was too small, too young, too invisible in her back row seat. There was no way anyone would notice her. She was safe. Mr. Peters stepped down from the stage, microphone in hand, and began walking through the center aisle. He moved slowly, dramatically, like a game show host about to announce a winner. His eyes scanned the faces in the crowd, passing over adults and children alike, building the suspense with every step. "Who will it be tonight?" he asked the room. "Who has a hidden gift they've been keeping from us?" Lily watched him with mild curiosity. She wondered who he would pick. Maybe the teenage boy 3 rows ahead, who looked like he was trying to disappear into his seat, or the older woman with the big earrings who had been humming along to every musical performance. Anyone, really. Anyone but her. Mr. Peters kept walking. He passed the front rows, the middle rows, getting closer and closer to the back. Lily could feel her heart starting to beat a little faster, though she told herself she was being silly. There were hundreds of people here. The chances of him picking her were practically zero. And then he stopped. He stopped right at her row, and he looked directly at her. "Well, hello there, little one," he said, his voice gentle and warm. "What's your name?" For a moment, Lily couldn't speak. Her throat had closed up completely. She looked up at this tall man with the friendly face, and all she could do was stare. This wasn't happening. This couldn't be happening. Her grandmother leaned in close and whispered in her ear, "It's okay, sweetheart. Just tell him your name." "Lily," she managed to say, her voice so quiet it was almost swallowed by the noise of the crowd. Mr. Peters smiled wide. "Lily, what a beautiful name. Tell me, Lily, do you have any talents? Can you sing? Dance? Maybe do a little magic trick?" Lily shook her head frantically. No. No. She couldn't do any of those things. Not in front of all these people. Not in front of anyone. She felt the panic rising in her chest like a wave about to crash. But Mr. Peters didn't move on. He didn't pick someone else. Instead, he crouched down so he was at her eye level, and his voice dropped to something softer. Something meant just for her. "You know," he said quietly, "I knew your mother. She was one of the best singers this town has ever heard, and I have a feeling that apple didn't fall far from the tree." Lily felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes. She didn't want to cry. Not here. Not now. Not in front of everyone. But the mention of her mother had hit her right in the center of her chest, in that place where she kept all the things she couldn't talk about. Her grandmother spoke up then, her voice steady and sure. "She has her mother's voice," she said. "She just doesn't know it yet." Lily turned to look at her grandmother with wide, betrayed eyes. How could she say that? How could she tell everyone her secret? But her grandmother just looked back at her with a gaze full of love and something else. Something that looked almost like faith. "I can't," Lily whispered, shaking her head. "I can't do it." Her grandmother took both of Lily's small hands in her own. "Do you remember what your mother always used to tell you? About your voice?" Lily remembered. Of course she remembered. Her mother had said it so many times, in so many different ways, that the words were practically carved into her heart. "Your voice is a gift, baby. Don't ever be afraid to share it." But her mother wasn't here anymore. Her mother couldn't hold her hand and walk her to the stage. Her mother couldn't stand in the wings and blow her kisses for good luck. Her mother was gone, and Lily was just a small girl in a too-tight dress, terrified of her own shadow. The crowd had gone quiet now. Everyone was watching. Lily could feel their eyes on her. Hundreds of them, waiting to see what she would do. Some people looked curious. Others looked sympathetic. A few looked impatient, ready to move on to something more interesting. Mr. Peters stood up and extended his hand toward her. "What do you say, Lily? Will you come up to the stage with me? Just for a few minutes. And if you get up there and decide you don't want to sing, that's perfectly okay. We'll give you a big round of applause just for being brave enough to try." Lily looked at his hand. It was big and steady, the hand of someone who wouldn't let her fall. She looked at her grandmother, who nodded slowly, encouragingly. She looked at the stage, so far away, so bright under the lights. And then, without fully understanding why, she reached out and took Mr. Peters's hand. The crowd began to clap as she stood up. It was a polite, encouraging kind of applause, the kind you give to someone you feel a little sorry for. Lily could hear whispers as she walked down the aisle. "Poor thing, she looks terrified. Isn't that the little girl whose mother passed last year? She's so tiny. I hope she doesn't freeze up there." Each step felt like it took an hour. The aisle seemed to stretch out forever, getting longer instead of shorter. Lily kept her eyes fixed on the stage, afraid that if she looked at the faces around her, she would lose her nerve completely. She thought about turning back. She thought about pulling her hand free and running out of the hall, disappearing into the cool night air outside. No one would blame her. She was just a child. Children got scared all the time, but something kept her moving forward. Maybe it was the warmth of Mr. Peters's hand. Maybe it was her grandmother's words, echoing in her mind. Maybe it was the photograph in her pocket, pressing against her leg with every step. reminding her of the woman who had never been afraid to sing. Finally, after what felt like a lifetime, they reached the stage. Mr. Peters helped her up the steps, and suddenly she was standing in the spotlight, blinded by the brightness. Unable to see anything beyond the first few rows, the microphone stand was too tall for her. Mr. Peters adjusted it, lowering it until it was right in front of her face. The microphone looked huge and intimidating, like some kind of mechanical monster waiting to swallow her voice. "Whenever you're ready, sweetheart," Mr. Peters said softly. Then he stepped back, leaving her alone in the center of the stage. Lily stood there, frozen. The silence was deafening. She could hear her own heartbeat pounding in her ears like a drum. Her mouth was dry. Her hands were shaking. She had never felt so small, so exposed, so completely and utterly terrified. Somewhere in the back of the room, her grandmother was watching. Somewhere beyond the sky, her mother was watching too. And somewhere deep inside her chest, a voice she had been hiding for almost a year was waiting to be set free. The seconds stretched into what felt like hours. Lily stood there under the burning spotlight, her small body casting a shadow that reached all the way to the back of the stage. She could feel the heat of the lights on her face, on her arms, seeping through the thin fabric of her blue dress. Sweat gathered at her temples. Her knees felt like they might give out at any moment. The crowd was patient at first. They smiled at her. These strangers with their kind eyes and their folded hands. They understood. She was just a little girl. A scared little girl who had been put on the spot. They would give her time, but time kept passing, and still Lily didn't move. She didn't speak. She didn't sing. She just stood there, gripping the microphone stand like it was the only thing keeping her from floating away. Someone in the middle of the room coughed. A baby started crying somewhere near the entrance, and was quickly hushed. A few people shifted in their seats, the wooden chairs creaking beneath them. The patience in the room was starting to thin, replaced by something that felt like pity. Lily could sense it. She could feel the shift in the air, the way people were starting to look at each other with raised eyebrows and small shrugs. "Poor thing," their faces said. "She's not going to do it. Someone should help her down." Mr. Peters took a small step toward her, ready to rescue her from her own silence. His hand was already reaching out, ready to gently guide her off the stage and back to her seat. It was okay. No one would think less of her. She had tried, and that was enough. But then something happened. Lily's hand moved to her pocket. Her fingers found the photograph there, the one she carried everywhere, the one with the worn edges and the faded colors. She didn't pull it out. She didn't need to. Just touching it was enough. Just feeling it against her fingertips brought her mother rushing back to her. She remembered a night, years ago, when she was maybe 5 or 6. There had been a thunderstorm, a bad one, with lightning that lit up the whole sky, and thunder that shook the windows. Lily had been terrified. She had run to her mother's room, crying, shaking, convinced that the world was ending. Her mother had pulled her into bed and held her close. And then, instead of telling her not to be scared, instead of saying all the things adults usually say, her mother had started to sing, softly at first, then louder, her voice rising above the sound of the storm until Lily couldn't hear the thunder anymore. All she could hear was her mother's voice, warm and safe and full of love. That night, her mother had told her something she never forgot. "When you're scared," her mother had whispered, "sing. Sing louder than your fear. Sing until the fear has no choice but to run away." Standing on that stage, paralyzed by terror, Lily finally understood what her mother had meant. She closed her eyes. She blocked out the lights, the faces, the weight of all those staring eyes. She went somewhere deep inside herself, to a place where it was just her and her mother, and the memory of a voice that had made everything better. The sound technician, a young man with headphones around his neck, looked at Mr. Peters with a question in his eyes. Should he play some music? Give her something to sing along to? Mr. Peters gave a small nod, and the technician scrolled through his playlist, looking for something simple, something a child might know. He found it. A soft piano melody began to play through the speakers, filling the hall with gentle notes. It was Amazing Grace, one of the most well-known songs in the world. Simple, beautiful, timeless. Lily recognized it immediately. Her heart clenched so hard, she thought it might stop altogether. This was her mother's song. This was the song her mother had sung more than any other. At church services and funerals and quiet evenings at home. This was the song her mother had sung to her on that stormy night. This was the song that lived in Lily's bones, in her blood, in every fiber of her being. She hadn't chosen it. She hadn't asked for it, but somehow, it had found her anyway. Lily took a breath. It was shaky at first, uneven. The breath of someone who was still fighting against fear. But she took another, and then another. Each one a little deeper, a little steadier than the last, and then she opened her mouth. The first note that came out was quiet. So quiet that only the people in the front row heard it. But there was something in that note. Something that made them lean forward in their seats. Something that made them hold their breath. Lily's voice grew stronger. The second note was clearer, more confident. By the third note, something extraordinary began to happen. The sound that poured out of this tiny girl was not the sound anyone expected. It was not the thin, wobbly voice of a frightened child. It was not the off-key warble of someone who couldn't carry a tune. It was something else entirely. It was pure, crystal clear. A voice that seemed to come from somewhere beyond her small body, somewhere ancient and eternal. It filled the room the way sunlight fills a dark space, reaching into every corner, touching every person. A woman in the third row gasped out loud. Her hand flew to her mouth, and tears immediately sprang to her eyes. She had heard a lot of singers in her life. She had never heard anything like this. The man sitting next to her, a retired music teacher who had spent 40 years training voices, sat perfectly still. His trained ear picked up every detail. The pitch was perfect. The tone was rich and full. The emotion behind it was so raw, so honest, that it almost hurt to hear. He turned to his wife and whispered, "That's once in a generation. Maybe once in a lifetime." Back in the last row, Lily's grandmother was already crying. She had known her granddaughter had a gift. She had heard Lily singing to herself when she thought no one was listening. But she had never heard this. She had never heard Lily truly let go, truly release the voice she had been hiding for so long. It sounded exactly like her daughter. It sounded exactly like the woman they had both lost. And yet, somehow, it also sounded like something new. Something that was purely Lily's own. On stage, Lily kept her eyes closed. She wasn't thinking about the crowd anymore. She wasn't thinking about her fear. She was thinking about her mother. She was singing to her mother. For her mother, through her mother, every note was a conversation. Every word was a message sent up to the sky, to wherever her mother might be. "I miss you. I love you. I haven't forgotten." The song built and built, Lily's voice rising with it, growing stronger and more powerful with each line. People throughout the hall were crying now. Not just a few. Dozens of them, strangers who had never met Lily, who knew nothing about her story, found themselves wiping their eyes and reaching for tissues. Mr. Peters stood at the side of the stage, completely frozen. In all his years of hosting this show, he had never seen anything like this. He had never felt anything like this. This little girl, this tiny child in her too small blue dress, was doing something magical. She was reaching inside people's hearts and touching things they had forgotten were there. The song continued. Lily's voice never wavered, never cracked, never lost its power. She sang like she had been singing her whole life. She sang like her mother was standing right beside her, guiding every note, supporting every breath. And in a way, maybe she was. Outside the community hall, people walking by on the street stopped to listen. They couldn't see what was happening inside, but they could hear it. That voice, that incredible voice, was leaking through the walls and windows, drawing them closer like moths to a flame. Inside, no one moved. No one checked their phones. No one whispered to their neighbors. Every single person in that room was completely, utterly captivated by the small girl on the stage, and she wasn't even finished yet. The melody carried through the hall like a living thing, wrapping itself around every person in the room. Lily's voice rose and fell with the music, sometimes soft as a whisper, sometimes powerful enough to make the walls tremble. She moved through the verses of Amazing Grace like she had sung them 1,000 times before. And in a way, she had, just never like this. Never out loud. Never for anyone but herself, and the memory of her mother. Tears were streaming down her face now. She could feel them, warm and wet on her cheeks, but she didn't wipe them away. She didn't even try to stop them. These tears weren't from fear anymore. They were from something deeper, something that had been locked inside her chest for almost a year, finally breaking free. She was grieving. Right there on that stage, in front of hundreds of strangers, she was finally letting herself grieve. In the audience, something remarkable was happening. People who had come to this talent show expecting nothing more than a pleasant evening of amateur entertainment were experiencing something they would remember for the rest of their lives. This wasn't just a performance. This was a moment. The kind of moment that changes the air in a room, that shifts something in the universe itself. An elderly man in the fourth row had his eyes closed. His wife of 52 years had passed away just 3 months ago, and he had been walking through his days like a ghost ever since. But listening to this little girl sing, he felt something crack open inside him. He felt his wife's presence, just for a second, like a warm hand on his shoulder. Tears rolled down his weathered cheeks. And for the first time since the funeral, they felt like healing instead of just hurt. A young mother near the aisle was holding her sleeping toddler against her chest. She had almost not come tonight. She had been exhausted, overwhelmed, feeling like she was failing at everything. But now, listening to this voice, she felt a strange sense of peace wash over her. She held her child a little tighter and made a silent promise to be more patient, more present, more grateful for the small moments. 2 teenage boys who had been bored out of their minds all evening sat completely still, their phones forgotten in their pockets. They would never admit it to each other, not in a million years. But both of them were fighting back tears. There was something about that voice that cut right through all their teenage armor, all their coolness, and their pretending not to care. It reached something real inside them, something they usually kept hidden. The sound technician had taken off his headphones. He stood behind his equipment with his mouth slightly open, watching Lily like she was something from another world. He had worked hundreds of shows, maybe thousands. He had heard professional singers, trained voices, people with record deals and concert tours. None of them had ever made him feel like this. Mr. Peters remained frozen at the edge of the stage. He had known Lily's mother. He had watched her perform on this very stage. And now, listening to her daughter, he could have sworn he was hearing the same voice. It was like time had folded in on itself, bringing the past and the present together in one impossible moment. He thought about all the talent shows he had hosted, all the acts he had introduced, all the awkward moments and technical difficulties and forgettable performances. None of it mattered compared to this. This was why he did it. This was what he had been waiting for all along without even knowing it. Lily reached the bridge of the song, the part where the melody lifts and the words take on new meaning. Her voice climbed higher, each note more powerful than the last. The ceiling of the community hall seemed to disappear. The walls fell away. There was nothing left but the music and the girl creating it. In the back row, Lily's grandmother was sobbing openly now. She didn't care who saw her. She didn't care what anyone thought. All she could do was listen to her granddaughter and feel her daughter's spirit filling the room. She had been so worried about Lily this past year. The child had become so quiet, so withdrawn, locking away her feelings behind a wall of silence. She had stopped singing. She had stopped laughing. She had stopped being the bright, joyful little girl she used to be. But now, watching her up there on that stage, her grandmother understood something important. Lily hadn't lost her light. She had just been protecting it, keeping it safe, until she was ready to let it shine again. And oh, how it was shining now. The song moved into its final verse. Lily's voice grew softer, more tender, but somehow even more powerful in its gentleness. Every word was deliberate. Every note was intentional. She was telling a story, not just singing a song. She was pouring out everything she had been holding inside, all the love and the loss and the longing, transforming it into something beautiful. People in the audience were holding hands now. Strangers who had never met were connecting through their tears, through the shared experience of witnessing something extraordinary. An old woman reached over and grasped the hand of the young man sitting next to her. A father pulled his daughter onto his lap and held her close. Couples leaned into each other, remembering their own losses, their own loves, their own reasons to be grateful. This was what music was supposed to do. This was its true power. Not to entertain, not to distract, but to connect. To remind people of their shared humanity, to make them feel less alone in a world that could be so lonely. Lily took a breath before the final line. It was a deep breath, filling her lungs completely, preparing for what was to come. She had never sung this song all the way through before. She had always stopped before the end, unable to face the emotions it brought up. But not tonight. Tonight, she would finish it. For her mother, for herself, for everyone who had ever lost someone they loved. The last note began low in her chest and rose up through her throat and out into the world. She held it there, suspended in the air like a bird in flight, refusing to let it go. The note stretched on, longer than seemed possible for such a small body, filling every inch of the room with its beauty. And then, slowly, gently, she let it fade. The final echo of her voice dissolved into silence. For a moment, nobody moved. Nobody breathed. The room was completely, utterly still. It was as if time itself had stopped, frozen in the wake of what had just happened. Lily stood alone on the stage, her eyes still closed, her small chest rising and falling with quick breaths. She didn't know if what she had done was good or bad. She didn't know if people had liked it or hated it. All she knew was that she had done something she never thought she could do. She had let her voice out. She had shared her gift. She had sung for her mother, in front of all these people. And she had survived. More than survived, she had flown. The silence stretched on for what felt like forever. 5 seconds. 10 seconds. An eternity packed into a few heartbeats. And then, from somewhere in the middle of the room, someone started to clap. It was a single pair of hands at first, breaking through the silence like a crack of thunder. Then, another pair joined. And another. And another. Within seconds, the entire room was on its feet. The applause exploded through the hall, so loud and so powerful that the walls themselves seemed to shake. People were cheering, shouting, whistling, stamping their feet. Some were still crying. Many were doing both at the same time. Lily opened her eyes. The lights were too bright for her to see much, but she could hear it. She could feel it. The wave of love and appreciation crashing over her like an ocean, lifting her up, carrying her somewhere she had never been before. She looked out into the blinding light, and even though she couldn't see her grandmother's face, she knew she was out there. Smiling, crying, proud, and somewhere beyond the ceiling, beyond the sky, beyond everything she could see or touch or understand. She knew her mother was there too, watching, smiling, finally hearing the voice her daughter had been hiding for so long. The applause would not stop. It rolled through the community hall in waves, each one louder than the last. People were on their feet, clapping until their palms stung, cheering until their throats went raw. Some had tears still streaming down their faces. Others were laughing with pure joy. The kind of laughter that comes when you witness something so beautiful it overflows into happiness. Lily stood frozen in the spotlight, overwhelmed by the wall of sound coming at her. Her small body trembled. Not from fear this time, but from the sheer force of emotion, pouring into her from every direction. She had never felt anything like this before. She had never known that so much love could exist in one room, directed at one person, at her. Mr. Peters walked back onto the stage, his own eyes red and wet. He had hosted this show for 15 years, and he had never once cried during a performance. Tonight, he didn't even try to hide it. He put his hand gently on Lily's shoulder and leaned down to the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, he said, his voice cracking with emotion. "I think we can all agree that we just witnessed something very, very special." The applause somehow grew even louder. People were nodding, turning to each other with looks of disbelief, still trying to process what they had just experienced. How could a voice like that come from such a small child? How could so much power and emotion fit inside one little girl? In the back row, Lily's grandmother was already pushing her way through the crowd. She moved as fast as her old legs could carry her, squeezing past people, mumbling apologies, her eyes fixed on the stage where her granddaughter stood. She had to get to her. She had to hold her. She had to tell her how proud she was. People made way for her when they saw her coming. Word had spread through the room about who she was, about who Lily was, about the mother they had both lost. Strangers reached out to touch her arm as she passed, offering silent congratulations, sharing in her joy and her grief. When she finally reached the stage, Mr. Peters helped her up the steps. Her knees were shaking almost as much as Lily's had been. But she didn't care about dignity or appearances. She only cared about the little girl standing in the middle of that spotlight. Lily saw her grandmother coming and something inside her broke open completely. All the strength she had found to sing, all the courage she had gathered to stand on that stage, melted away in an instant. She was just a little girl again, a little girl who missed her mother and needed her grandmother's arms around her. She ran to her. They collided in the middle of the stage, grandmother and granddaughter, holding each other so tightly it was hard to tell where one ended and the other began. Lily buried her face in her grandmother's chest and finally let herself cry properly. Not the silent tears that had fallen during her song, but deep, heaving sobs that came from somewhere at the very bottom of her soul. Her grandmother held her and rocked her gently, stroking her hair, whispering words that only Lily could hear. "You did it, baby. You did it. Your mama heard you. I know she did. She's so proud of you. I'm so proud of you." The crowd watched this moment with hushed reverence. Some looked away, feeling like they were intruding on something too private, too sacred to witness. Others couldn't look away, moved by the raw display of love and grief and healing happening right in front of them. What nobody knew yet was that this moment was being recorded. A young woman near the front had pulled out her phone when Lily first started singing. She had meant to capture just a few seconds, something to show her friends later, but she had ended up recording the entire performance, from the first trembling note, to the standing ovation, to the embrace now happening on stage. Her phone had captured everything, every second of magic that had unfolded in this small community hall. She would post the video that night, thinking maybe a few hundred people would watch it. She had no idea what was about to happen. By the next morning, the video had 10,000 views. By noon, it had 100,000. By the time Lily woke up from the deepest sleep she had slept in almost a year, the video had been shared 500,000 times and was climbing faster than anyone could believe. News stations picked up the story. Local at first, then regional, then national. The headlines wrote themselves. 8-year-old orphan stuns talent show with angelic voice. Little girl sings for her late mother, brings entire room to tears. The most emotional performance you'll see this year. Lily's grandmother's phone started ringing and didn't stop. Reporters wanted interviews. Producers wanted meetings. Talent agents wanted to sign her. Record labels wanted to talk about contracts and albums and tours. It was overwhelming. It was terrifying. It was everything Lily had never asked for and never expected. But through all of it, her grandmother kept her grounded. She screened every call, turned down every request that didn't feel right, protected her granddaughter from the chaos swirling around them. Lily was still a child. She still needed to go to school, to play with friends, to have a normal life. Fame could wait. Childhood could not. They did agree to one interview, just one, with a kind reporter from the local news who had known Lily's mother years ago. The reporter didn't push or pry. She just let Lily tell her story in her own words, at her own pace. When the reporter asked Lily what she had been thinking about while she sang, Lily's answer was simple. "My mom," she said. "I was singing to my mom. I wanted her to hear me." The reporter had to pause and collect herself before asking the next question. Do you think she heard you? Lily nodded without hesitation. Yes. I know she did. I could feel her there with me. Like she was standing right next to me on that stage. The clip of that answer went viral too. People all over the world watched this small girl talk about her mother with such certainty, such faith, and they found themselves believing her. They found themselves hoping that wherever Lily's mother was, she really had heard her daughter sing. Weeks passed. The attention slowly faded as the world moved on to the next viral moment, the next heartwarming story. But for Lily, everything had changed. She started singing again. Not on stages, not for cameras, but in all the small ways her mother used to sing. She hummed while she ate breakfast. She sang softly while doing her homework. She let her voice out in the shower, not hiding it anymore, not keeping it trapped inside her chest. Her grandmother noticed the difference immediately. The light was back in Lily's eyes. The heaviness that had pressed down on her for so long was lifting, little by little, day by day. She was healing, finally, truly healing. One evening, about a month after the talent show, Lily and her grandmother sat on the porch swing, watching the sunset. The sky was painted in shades of orange and pink, and the air was warm and soft. They swung gently back and forth, not talking, just being together. After a long while, Lily spoke. "Grandma." "Yes, sweetheart? Do you think Mom knew that I was scared to sing?" Her grandmother thought about this carefully before answering. "I think your mother knew everything about you, baby. She knew you better than anyone. Then why didn't she tell me not to be scared?" Her grandmother smiled and pulled Lily closer. "Maybe because she knew you had to figure it out yourself. Some things can't be taught. They have to be discovered, and you discovered something beautiful that night. Didn't you?" Lily nodded slowly. She reached into her pocket and pulled out the photograph. The one she still carried everywhere. She looked at her mother's face, frozen forever in that moment of pure joy, mid-song, alive with music. "I'm going to keep singing," Lily said quietly. "For her, and for me." Her grandmother kissed the top of her head. "That's all she ever wanted. Sweetheart. That's all any of us ever wanted." They sat there together as the sun sank below the horizon. Two people bound by love and loss, and the healing power of a voice that refused to stay silent. The future was uncertain. There would be more stages, more songs, more challenges to face. But for now, in this moment, everything was exactly as it should be, and somewhere, beyond the painted sky, a mother was smiling. Her daughter had found her voice, and it was beautiful.